A tiny Filipino boy steps onto the massive stage, clutching a worn microphone, eyes wide with nervous anticipation. The audience is buzzing, cameras flashing, but he barely notices. He whispers to himself, "Mama, don't go," his voice trembling. As the spotlight hits him, silence falls over the theater. Simon Cowell watches, skeptical yet curious. The first fragile notes escape his lips, raw and filled with longing, instantly drawing everyone into a story of love, sacrifice, and hope. The stage was enormous, lights blazing down like tiny suns, yet the boy felt as small as a shadow beneath them. Clutching a worn, slightly frayed microphone in his hands, he glanced at the audience, where hundreds of strangers stared back with a mix of curiosity and expectation. Cameras flashed, capturing every flicker of emotion on his face, but his focus was elsewhere, on a memory that had lived in his heart for years. He remembered his mother's gentle voice, calling him softly from the other room while he slept, her tired feet barely making a sound as she moved around their small home in the Philippines. She worked long hours in a distant city, cleaning offices and serving food, often sacrificing sleep, meals, and her own comfort just to send him enough money for school, books, and a small meal at home. There were nights when he cried himself to sleep, missing her presence, missing her warmth, but he also understood, even as a child, that her sacrifices were acts of love, acts of courage that went unseen by the world. As he began to sing, the first fragile notes of "Mama, Don't Go" trembled through the theater, soft but deliberate, each word carrying the weight of his longing. The melody wove through the room like a thread of emotion, invisible but palpable, tying every listener to the boy's story. With every line, he poured not just his voice, but every memory of his mother's sacrifice, every quiet moment when he wished she could be there, every hug he missed while she worked to give him a better life. The judges' faces shifted as they listened. Simon Cowell, always so discerning and difficult to impress, leaned forward slightly, his arms crossed but his eyes unconsciously softening. The boy's vulnerability was unmistakable, a raw honesty that even the hardest critics couldn't ignore. And behind the cameras, in the audience, there were mothers and fathers, children and teenagers, anyone who had ever loved or missed someone, quietly nodding along, feeling that same ache of absence and hope. The boy closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories flow freely. He saw his mother wiping sweat from her brow, counting coins carefully so that he could go to school. He saw her walking home late at night, her steps tired but determined, never letting him feel the weight of her exhaustion. Each note he sang was a thank you, a confession, a promise that her efforts had not gone unnoticed. He sang not for applause, not for recognition, but to honor the unspoken bond of love and sacrifice that had carried him. Through the hardest times of his life, the stage lights cast a soft halo around him, turning the small boy into a symbol of hope and resilience. What began as a simple audition was transforming into something far greater. A heartfelt testament to the power of selflessness, the beauty of familial love, and the quiet heroism of those who give everything without asking for anything in return. For the first time that night, the boy felt a surge of courage. The memory of his mother's sacrifices, instead of making him tremble, made him strong. And as his voice began to rise, steady and unwavering, it was clear that this was more than a performance, it was a story that the world needed to hear. As the boy's voice filled the theater, a hush fell over the crowd, as if the entire room had collectively held its breath. Each note of "Mama, Don't Go" carried more than just melody, it carried a lifetime of longing, heartache, and unwavering love. The fragile tremor in his voice, the subtle quiver in his hands, told a story no words could capture, the story of a child separated from the one person who meant everything to him. Memories pressed against him, like the weight of the spotlight above. He remembered the nights when the house felt too quiet, the rooms empty, and he curled up on the floor, clutching a small pillow that smelled faintly of his mother's perfume. She had left early for work while he slept, and returned late, exhausted but smiling, hiding her fatigue behind a mask of warmth. Each night, he promised himself he would make her proud, that he would somehow repay the sacrifices she made silently, without complaint, for his happiness. He glanced toward the audience. And there she was, his mother, sitting in the front row. Her face streaked with tears, but shining with pride. For a moment, their eyes met, and a wave of courage surged through him. This song wasn't just a performance. It was a message, a plea, a declaration of love that transcended language and culture. He wasn't singing to win a competition. He was singing so that the world could feel what he felt: everyday gratitude, longing, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. As the melody soared, his voice cracked slightly, raw and vulnerable, but instead of faltering, he leaned into the emotion, letting it carry him forward. The vulnerability was magnetic, drawing every listener closer into his world. He could see Simon Cowell's eyes soften, his usual stern expression replaced by a rare vulnerability of his own. The judges, the audience, even the cameras capturing the moment, everyone was captivated by the honesty. Pouring from the boy's heart, the theater seemed suspended in time. Every person in the room could feel the echoes of their own experiences, those moments when love demanded sacrifice, when distance tested bonds, when words alone couldn't express the depth of emotion in one's heart. Some audience members quietly dabbed their eyes. Others held their breath, as though afraid to disturb the fragile, beautiful honesty unfolding before them. And yet, amid the vulnerability, there was strength. Each note, each carefully chosen word, became a bridge between the boy and the audience. Between his heart and his mother's, it was a reminder that true courage isn't the absence of fear or uncertainty, but the decision to speak, to act, to give one's heart fully. Even when the stakes feel impossibly high, by the time the chorus returned, his voice had found a steady, unwavering clarity. The boy no longer seemed small beneath the lights. He seemed luminous, a living testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And in that moment, the audience didn't just hear a song, they felt it. They felt the weight of separation, the warmth of selfless devotion, and the undeniable truth that sometimes the most ordinary acts of love are the most extraordinary. The boy's voice began to rise stronger now, richer, carried by something far greater than confidence. It was love. Pure, unfiltered love. Each lyric of Mama, Don't Go echoed through the hall like a prayer, wrapping itself around the hearts of everyone present. The crowd was completely still. You could hear the soft hum of the stage lights, the gentle whir of the cameras, and then just his voice, trembling yet radiant, filling the silence with something sacred. Simon Cowell, usually stoic and measured, leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the small figure under the spotlight. He had seen hundreds, maybe thousands, of contestants before, but there was something profoundly different about this one. This wasn't talent chasing fame. This was emotion-seeking connection. The authenticity in that little boy's performance broke through the walls of cynicism that so often guarded people's hearts. Behind the boy, the giant LED screen projected faint images, scenes from his life, flashing like fragments of memory. A modest home in the Philippines, his mother's tired smile, an old photograph taped to the wall, a pair of small shoes by the door. The visuals weren't just background, they were pieces of his soul laid bare before the world. Each image synced perfectly with his voice, making it feel like everyone was walking beside him through his memories. The audience began to change. The murmurs and whispers that had filled the theater before were gone, replaced by tears, soft sighs, and the quiet sound of hearts breaking open. A woman in the front row clutched her chest, whispering, "He's singing to all of us." A father in the middle section wrapped an arm around his daughter, his eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. Even the camera crew, professionals used to keeping emotions at bay, found themselves blinking rapidly, struggling to focus through misty eyes. As the boy sang the line, "Mama, please don't leave me. I need your love to breathe," his voice cracked again, but this time, it wasn't a flaw. It was the truth made audible. The crack wasn't weakness, it was honesty, the kind that makes music timeless and moments unforgettable. Then something beautiful happened. The audience began to sway softly, as if moved by an invisible current. The connection between performer and listener became electric. The boy could feel it, he wasn't alone anymore. His pain had found a home in the hearts of strangers. His love for his mother had transcended language, geography, and circumstance, becoming a universal emotion shared by everyone in that room. The final chorus soared. And though his small frame seemed almost swallowed by the grand stage, his presence filled every corner of it. The last note lingered, delicate yet powerful, echoing long after the music stopped. For a few seconds, no one moved. The air felt heavy, sacred, like the world had collectively paused to feel something real again. And then, as if a spell had broken, the theater erupted into applause, loud, uncontrollable, heartfelt. People stood, clapping through their tears, cheering not just for a song, but for a story. For a love that reminded them of their own humanity. The final note lingered in the air like a soft whisper from heaven. Then, silence. The kind of silence that feels alive, heavy, charged, sacred. The little Filipino boy stood center stage, trembling, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. His hands still clutched the microphone, knuckles pale, eyes glistening. For a few heartbeats, no one moved. No applause, no sound. Just the echo of his voice still floating somewhere between the lights and the rafters. Then, slowly, the audience began to rise. First, a single clap. Then another. Within seconds, the entire theater erupted into a standing ovation. A wave of emotion that washed over the boy like a warm embrace. Tears filled his eyes as he looked out into the sea of faces. Strangers united in a single feeling. Love. His gaze drifted toward his mother in the front row. She was standing too, both hands pressed to her heart, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Simon Cowell sat motionless, his expression unreadable. The other judges wiped their eyes, visibly moved. But Simon's silence was the loudest thing in the room. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying the boy, this fragile, brave soul who had just turned pain into poetry. Then, without warning, Simon stood up. The crowd's noise dimmed instantly. All eyes turned to him. Simon took a deep breath, his face softening in a way rarely seen on television. "You," he said, pointing gently toward the boy, "just reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." His voice cracked slightly as he continued, "That wasn't just a song. That was heart. That was truth." And that he slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. A burst of gold confetti exploded into the air, swirling like 1,000 tiny stars raining down from above. The audience screamed, some cheering, others crying. The boy froze in shock, eyes wide, mouth open in disbelief. Then, as the realization hit him, he dropped to his knees, overcome with emotion. The music swelled, triumphant, cinematic, while his mother rushed onto the stage, tears streaming down her face. She fell to her knees beside him, wrapping him in her arms as the confetti fell around them like a blessing. Simon smiled, not his usual polite grin, but something real, something tender. "You've just given us one of those moments we'll never forget," he said softly. "You sang for every mother, every child, every person who's ever loved and lost. You're a star, but more than that, you're a light." The boy could barely speak, his tears mixing with laughter as he hugged his mother tightly. The crowd chanted his name, the judges clapped through their tears. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel small. He felt infinite. In that single, golden moment. He realized the truth. He hadn't just sung for his mother, he had sung for the world. And the world had listened. Golden confetti still floated gently through the air, catching the stage lights and sparkling like 1,000 tiny suns. The boy remained in his mother's arms, the noise of the crowd fading into a soft blur around them. For a long moment, he didn't want to move, he just wanted to stay there, wrapped in the warmth and safety that had carried him through every lonely night. Every dream, every song. His mother's hands trembled as she held his face, whispering through her tears, "I'm so proud of you, Anak. You did it." Her voice cracked, filled with disbelief and joy all at once. The boy smiled through his tears. "No, Mama," he said softly. "We did it." The camera panned out, capturing the breathtaking image of the two, a mother and son, surrounded by a shower of gold, bound together by love and sacrifice. It wasn't just a victory for them. It was a moment for every parent who had ever worked tirelessly for their child, and for every child who had ever carried the dream of making their parent proud. As they stood together, Simon Cowell spoke again, his voice carrying a sincerity rarely heard on stage. "You reminded us tonight," he said, "that real music doesn't need perfection. It needs heart. And you, young man, have one of the biggest hearts I've ever seen." The crowd roared again, cheering for the boy, for his courage, for his story. But amid the thunderous applause, something quieter, deeper was happening. People in the audience held one another, reflecting on their own lives. Some thought of their mothers working extra shifts. Others remembered phone calls they hadn't made, words they hadn't said. The boy's song had done more than win a golden buzzer. It had reawakened compassion. As the production team prepared to close the segment, the boy's mother knelt down and whispered, "When I worked far away, I always worried you'd forget how much I love you." He shook his head, his voice small but sure. "I never forgot, Mama. I sang so the world would know what your love sounds like." The audience erupted once more, not just clapping, but standing for something bigger: the power of love, the resilience of family, the strength of the human spirit. When the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, the boy and his mother walked hand in hand backstage. Crew members smiled, wiping away tears, offering hugs and congratulations. The boy turned back one last time to glance at the stage, still glittering with golden light, and whispered a quiet thank you. He didn't know what the future held: fame, opportunities, maybe even challenges. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: that love, pure and simple, had changed everything. As the screen faded to black, the narrator's voice carried the final message. Sometimes, it's not the biggest voices that move the world, it's the truest hearts. And tonight, a little boy from the Philippines reminded us all that love can turn even the smallest song into a miracle. The last image lingered: the boy and his mother walking into the light, a symbol of hope, courage, and the timeless beauty of kindness.